Bangladesh, a nation born from revolution, found itself in turmoil. This time, the fight was for equality and opportunity. The controversial quota system for government jobs was at the heart of the unrest. Designed to uplift marginalized communities, it became a symbol of discrimination. Protests erupted, questioning if Bangladesh could build a future of justice and equality. Dhaka's streets became a stage for dissent. Students led the movement, demanding a fair chance based on merit. The government's choices would shape the nation's future for generations. The quota system, designed to uplift disadvantaged communities, had become a double-edged sword. Its roots lay in the aftermath of Bangladesh's bloody birth. It aimed to ensure representation for marginalized groups. However, it morphed into a source of resentment. Critics argued it created a new form of inequality. Rewarding birth over merit, it stifled potential. The quota system, once a symbol of hope, had become a lightning rod for discontent. The tension surrounding the quota system reached a fever pitch following a series of public remarks by the Prime Minister. Her words, intended to address the concerns of the protesting students, instead ignited a firestorm of controversy. The Prime Minister, while acknowledging the need for dialogue, defended the quota system as a necessary measure to ensure social justice. She argued that it was essential to protect the rights of those who had historically been denied opportunities, emphasizing the government's commitment to uplifting marginalized communities. However, her words were met with fierce resistance from the student protesters. They argued that her defense of the quota system reflected a disconnect from the realities they faced. The Prime Minister's remarks, they felt, failed to address their core demand, a merit-based system that rewarded talent and hard work, regardless of background. The chasm between the government's stance and the students' demands widened, setting the stage for a confrontation that would have far-reaching consequences for the nation. The heart of the protests pulsed within the historic walls of Dhaka University, the nation's premier institution of higher learning. The university, long considered a bastion of intellectual freedom and a breeding ground for future leaders, transformed into a battleground. Students, their frustrations boiling over, clashed with law enforcement officials in a series of increasingly violent confrontations. What began as peaceful demonstrations escalated into running battles, with tear gas and rubber bullets filling the air.
The iconic campus, once a sanctuary for knowledge and debate, became a symbol of the nation's turmoil. The clashes at Dhaka University sent shockwaves throughout Bangladesh, galvanizing support for the student movement while raising serious concerns about the government's handling of the crisis.
The violence on campus served as a stark reminder of the high stakes involved, highlighting the urgent need for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. As the protests intensified, a deeply offensive term, laden with historical baggage, was hurled at the student protesters, Razakar. This term, far from being a mere insult, carried the weight of a dark and painful past, instantly inflaming tensions and deepening the divide.
Razakar referred to local collaborators who had sided with the Pakistani army during Bangladesh's bloody war of independence in 1971. These individuals were widely perceived as traitors who had betrayed their own people, participating in atrocities and human rights abuses.
The use of this term against the student protesters was not only deeply hurtful, but also historically inaccurate and deeply divisive. It served to delegitimize their grievances and paint them as enemies of the state, rather than citizens exercising their democratic right to protest. The invocation of such a loaded term underscored the volatility of the situation and the deep-seated wounds that continued to haunt Bangladesh decades after its hard-fought independence. The quota system, far from being a recent invention, had a long and contentious history in Bangladesh. Its roots intertwined with the nation's tumultuous past. Implemented in the aftermath of independence, the system was initially intended as a temporary measure to address the systematic marginalization of certain ethnic and religious groups during Pakistani rule.
However, what began as a means of redress soon became entrenched in the political landscape, evolving into a complex and controversial policy with far-reaching consequences. Over the decades, the quota system underwent numerous revisions and amendments, reflecting the shifting political winds and the evolving social dynamics of Bangladesh.
Governments came and went, each leaving their mark on the policy, expanding its scope, or tweaking its provisions to appease various constituencies. However, despite these attempts at reform, the fundamental issues at the heart of the quota system remained unaddressed. It continued to be perceived by many as a system that rewarded birth over merit, fueling resentment and perpetuating a cycle of inequality. While the quota system served as the immediate catalyst for the protests, the unrest in Bangladesh ran far deeper. The student demonstrations were a symptom of broader societal anxieties and frustrations, reflecting a growing sense of disillusionment among the nation's youth.
At the heart of this discontent lay a complex web of interconnected factors, including soaring youth unemployment, a stagnant economy, and a perceived lack of opportunities.
The education system, while producing a growing pool of graduates, struggled to keep pace with the demands of the job market, leaving many young people feeling overqualified and underemployed. This sense of frustration and disillusionment, coupled with a perceived lack of upward mobility, created a fertile ground for discontent, fueling a desire for change and a yearning for a brighter future. Section 8. A Generation's Cry, the Demand for Meritocracy. The protests in Bangladesh were not merely a rejection of the quota system. They were a powerful articulation of a generation's aspirations and anxieties. The students, at the forefront of this movement, represented a generation that had come of age in a rapidly changing world, a generation connected to global trends and exposed to new possibilities.
They yearned for a Bangladesh that embraced meritocracy, a Bangladesh where their talents and hard work, not their birth or background, would determine their destiny.
The demand for meritocracy was not simply about securing government jobs. It was about creating a level playing field, a society where everyone had an equal opportunity to succeed. It was a rejection of a system that they believed perpetuated inequality and stifled their potential. The students yearned for a Bangladesh that valued their skills and knowledge, a Bangladesh that empowered them to become agents of change and architects of their own future. Section 9. The Unfolding Crisis. Navigating a Path Forward. The protests in Bangladesh presented the government with a complex and delicate challenge. The nation stood at a crossroads, grappling with the need to address historical injustices while also creating a more equitable and meritocratic society.
The government's response to this crisis would have far-reaching consequences, shaping the trajectory of the nation and impacting the lives of generations to come.
Finding a path forward required a nuanced and multifaceted approach. It demanded a willingness to engage in dialogue, to listen to the grievances of the protesters, and to acknowledge the shortcomings of existing policies. It necessitated a commitment to finding solutions that addressed both the historical injustices that the quota system sought to rectify and the legitimate concerns of those who felt disadvantaged by it. It demanded a delicate balancing act, a careful calibration of policies that promoted both equity and opportunity. Section 10. The Future of Bangladesh. Charting a course through uncertainty. The protests in Bangladesh served as a stark reminder of the challenges and opportunities facing this young nation. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but it also held the promise of progress and transformation.
The decisions made in the wake of these protests would have a profound impact on the future of Bangladesh, shaping its social fabric, its political landscape, and its economic trajectory.
Navigating this uncertain terrain required a commitment to dialogue, a willingness to embrace change, and a shared vision for a more just and equitable Bangladesh. It demanded a recognition that true progress lay not in perpetuating divisions, but in building bridges, in creating a society where every citizen had the opportunity to reach their full potential. The future of Bangladesh hinged on its ability to learn from the past, to heal old wounds, and to chart a new course towards a brighter and more inclusive tomorrow. Section 11. Conclusion: The Long Road to Equity and Justice. The protests in Bangladesh, sparked by the controversial quota system, illuminated the complex demands of justice, equality, and meritocracy. They revealed deep-seated grievances in a nation striving for a more equitable future. The road ahead for Bangladesh was long, demanding careful navigation and open dialogue. True progress required more than economic growth. It demanded social justice. The journey towards equity and justice required empathy and challenging the status quo. The protests offered a valuable opportunity for reflection and dialogue.